Welcome. This is John Bush, Professor of Biology. This is the process. This is my real-time research project on target analysis. Questions that I'm pursuing are the idea of vacated targets. I think in order to look at that, we have to establish some norms in the process of reference class forecasting. Take a look at that lesson. And so I've been looking from 2013 to 21, looking at teams, looking at the league at that level right now. So it's a top-down approach. What is kind of an expected change year to year within teams? Okay, figured that out. What about running backs, tight ends, and now in this lesson, wide receivers, the number of targets that is probably expected anyway. So if you don't have that, then how can you define something really dramatic one way or the other, plus or minus, in target distribution and targets awarded or taken away if we don't know that? In other words, is 10 targets interesting, 20, 30? When does it get interesting? And so that's the whole point of the top-down approach. Again, if you're just joining me, start back at, was it 142 maybe? Lesson 142. Probably need reference class forecasting lesson as well. So go find that in the Science of Fantasy Football.com list of podcast lessons or lessons, video lessons. So I'm finishing up with the positions, and it occurred to me that I probably need to look at distribution changes. Year to year, how do teams distribute their targets? Kind of what's the range of, let's call it, normality? Okay, so again, this reference class forecasting is driving answering that question. And if those are things you don't know, don't feel bad. Nobody's doing this work but me that I know of. Like I said, I don't know behind all the paywalls, but certainly nobody's anteing up this. And, these websites making money, they need to invest in some serious research. Companies do R&D, and none of the fantasy websites that I've seen has an R&D budget or does that. They just hire, I don't know who they hire, people, hey, I'm an expert. Okay, come on. There's no plan that I can see. And you can look at my opinion about the expert problem we have in fantasy. I don't see it happening right now. I think they do just enough to get you interested and click. And I'm, interested in going the completely opposite direction. So the few of you that's found me, that's what I'm interested in, is trying to use the scientific methodology to approach these research questions. And it's just not out there. And I'm assuming it's coming. Just but I don't know that. I don't know, will it ever be enough people interested in that level, or they just give me the one sheet of paper that I can barely read through, a 6-pack of beer at my draft. I mean, I understand that. Probably most people are not going to be listening to me. That's fine. Okay. Again, I do this for myself as much as anyone else. If people can tag along, great. If not, I don't care because I'm going to use it, make my game better, make me a little money. That's what I'm doing. I was doing this before I started putting it out there, but I'm doing it now. Been doing it a long time, and I'm going to assure you, those that are trying to break in, you need to go with, hot air approaches, not any kind of deep metrics, because it's just not out there. People are not that in a lot of people are not. Okay. If they were, then they would be hunting myself and others down, the few that I see do some kind of measure. I don't see it, it's just not out there. So that's fine. But don't trick yourself to think, well, if I show enough research, everybody will want to know. No, I don't think that's the case at all. And the ones that do will find the places that do the stuff that they're interested in. What we see is what has been selected for in the fantasy football environment. So if you're not pleased by materials you see or how it's spun or the quality of the so-called experts, that's what's selected for. Websites, companies can get away with just, folks off the street, come on in, can you write? Okay, pen to paper kind of thing. That's what's selected for. And you're saying, what would it look like if it wasn't? There'd be a pipeline that experts would be attracted. And, if there was a need for it and if there was money on the table, those people would come out of the woodwork to get it. And, there's no cheese out there for deep research in fantasy football that I can see. The only one that I suspect are out there are the daily fantasy football players. I suspect there are groups, syndicates, that are pooling money and resources together. I know in things like horse racing and other kinds of gambling, the literature's definitely full of experts. There are people full of syndicates that are doing things. Look at the Hong Kong horse race handicap and just take a look at, just search that, Hong Kong horse racing research syndicate, and you'll find who I'm talking about. And there's probably others that are out there, and nobody's going in alone with the serious big money. Okay, so they're groups. And so the downside of what I'm doing is I'm one person, and I've got a lot more questions. I just don't have the expertise available for me to delegate out these research questions. There's just no resources to pay for the journey that I can envision. So it is what it is. Okay, enough running my mouth. Let me move on to the actual research here. So wide receivers here. And if you go to 142, I generated that top table, 2013 to 21. Number of weeks played changed last year to 18. The overall players, total count of players targeted, that's any player that received a target, has increased over time. Okay. In fact, last year was the highest level, 513. Look at 2013, 9 years before, 421. So almost, 80, 90 players more that have been added to the targeting ranks. So I think what that's telling us is specialization is here. There's packages and things for running backs, third down running backs, goal line, wide receiver packages, things. So there's a specialization that's occurring. So it makes it harder to find in certain positions the so-called bell cow. There's obviously some exceptions, and those are like Kelsey are worth their weight in gold, and I think people recognize there's no secret to that. The sum of targets has gone up, of course, the weeks there, and the sum of targets per game, if you look across, has increased. So even if we got an extra week, there's still more passing being done in the last couple years. The targeting rate, though, has gone down per player. And I think, of course, the more players getting targets, the fewer targets per player. And that's what we're kind of seeing here. And that's not surprising. So how does that look with the wide receivers? Same trend of 60 plus from 2013 to 21. So there's definitely some specialization. So 60 of the 90 here overall are wide receivers. So 30 are tight ends and running backs. Number of targets have gone up as well. Probably not as dramatic, but definitely 400 and something. And per game has gone up in the last 2 years. Look at this. So we are just slinging the ball more, and there it is. People think that, but they don't. I don't know if they tell you that data. Here's the data. Okay. But what's interesting is the targeting rate per player is gone down. Okay. It's gone down. And that's tracking with the more players involved in catching passes, right? So each individual player is scoring less overall, right? So it's what that's doing is making it harder for us, and I think that's going to have to push research a little more. It may take a while for people to realize that, and again, I don't think there's enough money out there to make it worthwhile. But if there ever is the case, then you're going to see people trying to do research projects, and I hope so. Save me time. Targets per player have definitely gone down as well. So targets per player, the rate of targets being thrown to each individual player have gone down. The number of target players are up, the number of targets up, the number of targets in the league per week, per game is up. So it's just the distribution is more diverse than usual. So right now, it's probably not overly critical to find these specialized players, and it may be hard to spot them. In other words, they may not show up till after the season has started. Coaches will start noticing, hey, every time we do red zone, this guy's open or something. He's our third or fourth on the pecking order, but he really can do what we need in the red zone. So it's going to drive things happening, right? So everything we see in the league is being driven and selected for right now. So all these movement forward is being driven by the evolution, as it were, of the whole system. And so that's why a system approach and a top down is going to be, I think, more required than ever these days. So I think this is coming into my time more than probably when I started in early 2000s. Things have really changed since then. Okay. So let's move on to wide receivers. So I asked the question, and I've done this for the running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers. So I took each of the categories and figured out the totals versus kind of the average there. And we see that tight ends are only about a fifth or a fourth of total targeted players. They're not, as critical. But that means people like Kelsey then are really going to stand out over the rest here. The target games are in the 20s. The targeted rate is 77, so it's the lowest. But the targeting per player is actually higher than running backs. So there's a lot of running backs that are getting targets, but probably the specialized ones, the pass catching ones, are not as many as the tight ends. I think that's what that data is telling us a little bit. And certainly wide receivers are 31% over the average of targets per player. So most of the new targets that are recruited are going to the wide receivers here. The targeting rate's gone up and whatnot. So all the metrics are telling me that, and it's not surprising, that wide receivers are getting the targeting show here. But just the thing about tight ends, I think, is kind of interesting versus running back. There's fewer tight ends getting targeted, but the fewer ones are getting more targets. So they haven't been as super specialized as I believe the running backs are based on these metrics here. So by having specialized running backs, you've cut the value of running backs that are pass catchers more than the tight ends. So just kind of, especially deep ones, later in the draft, people start looking for pass catching running backs. They're probably going to be of less value, I predict that, than in the last years or so. So that's going down. If you can find that niche one that is team specific, then that should be fine. But you just can't. You have to do. I guess that's what I'm trying to say is you're going to have to do deeper research there, especially the ones that you're drafting later in the drafts here. But again, fewer tight ends, but they're still getting nice targets. And of course, wide receivers are as well. So here's the total rates. If you just looked at the data I just showed you, just, pretty purple and blue here. Love this. So you can kind of see the targeting rates are the lowest in tight ends. So tight ends, even though they maybe get more targets per player, are not overall getting peppered with targets compared certainly to wide receivers. And there's a lot more running backs that are catching passes these days. Here is the targeted players. Again, tight ends, the lowest, wide receivers highest, running backs in the middle here. Sum of targets really isn't much different. So wide receivers are 60% of the show here, but these two are 20 and 20. But again, there's fewer tight ends getting the show, so they're going to be peppered with more targets. So functional tight ends that are used not for blocking but for pass catching, are going to have some value. And probably that's the idea in your draft of picking these TD sensitive players. So if teams use them in the red zone more, they're going to have more value than others in their, in late in the draft kind of thing. Sum of targets per game, not really much different here between what we saw before. And the targets per player, tight ends, fewer of them, but they're really getting more targets than running backs. So there's a lot more running backs getting fewer targets versus tight ends. And of course, wide receivers are really, the targeting shows. So in PPR leagues, I think they're still going to hold and continue to hold value. So your research should kind of be in proportion to this graph in some ways, in this bar graph here, that wide receivers that are target hogs and catching, that's still going to be very fruitful here. But tight ends, that, there's fewer of them, but the ones that can really catch are going to be very valuable as well. So it is worth your time to do research. I think, again, running backs that are pass catchers are being diluted out a little bit. So that always hurts the value overall, especially later, in the draft kind of thing, unless they're the clear handcuff. So this is wide receivers, looking at each team from 2013 to 21 in the columns, and then the total sum of the targets there. And I colorize the total targets. Blue is high and red is low. So you can see historical 9 years, what teams have been sucky with targets here. I see interest that Kansas City, when Kelsey came along, the whole thing changed, didn't it? Look at 13, 14, 15. Tight ends were not part of Kansas City's show, and now they're a big part. So, these 9-year numbers, probably a little bit deceiving. You can look in the last couple of years. And you're saying, what are the green and the red? The green is the top 20% over the 9 years, and the red is the bottom 20%. So I didn't look year by year. I looked across the whole 9 years because I wanted to see the top level changes here. And you can look across the years here. So 2021, look at that. It's 6, 7, 8 highs, 3 lows. So 2021 was a very, very strange year. Okay. So nobody's told you that. I'm telling you that now. People are going to be tricked if they assume 2021 was like 2020 and etc. And I think you'll see later what I'm going to show you about the bottom side distribution in 2021 was way different versus the last 9 years. So things are different. So if you're proceeding like 2022 is going to be 2021, that could be dangerous. It's kind of just an overall. Realize there's a little bit more mines in the minefield than you think. And as far as I know, I'm the first one to say that. And again, I'm not sure most of the, quote, experts would even know how to deal with that, or certainly take the time to find it. They'd rather squawk about who's number 1 versus who number 2. Can you imagine spending your time wasting reading an article? CMC is number 1. No, Taylor's number 1. No, Eckler's number 1. You're only going to get 1 pick of the top 3. So, a lot of times the decision's already been made if that's your strategy. So I would urge you, your precious time, not to waste it with hot air pundits there that are, that there's nothing underneath, right? You pull the curtain back and it's like, where's everything? I don't know. You tell me where everything is. I'm putting the potatoes and the meat together with the gravy here. Okay, my gumbo is strong, folks. So I'm warning you now, 2021, and you're saying, well, what are you doing about it? Well, I'm doing deeper thinking in wide receivers. When I'm comparing them, I'm thinking a little bit more about what's going on, the pecking order, than I usually do. I'm a lot more skeptical about the ADP this year for wide receivers, and I urge you to be too. Doesn't mean the ADP's not right. Wisdom of the crowds. There is some, historical precedence for it. But overall, I just urge you to do a little more research and due diligence if you're playing for money. If you're not, if it's just, slap back league, down the street, then, why even, you should turn me off now, because it's the effort for you to figure out what the hell I'm saying is way too much. I'm hoping those that are playing for some money are actually, listening to me. Okay, and you're saying, well, what is the team colorization? It's I just wanted everybody to see 2021. Atlanta sucked, New Orleans and Philly sucked. Here are the ones in green that did really well. Okay, so just with nothing else, and a lot of this is not a secret here. Everybody knows some of these. Jacksonville may be a little bit of a surprise. The Jets a little bit. But other than that, I think that's pretty clear. I mean, when it's slap in your face, obvious metrics, everybody's got that. So remember, in horse racing, if everybody, including the hot dog man, knows it, it's not worth anything. Sacred, scarce knowledge is what is more valuable, right? It's the unread books in the library that are more valuable than the ones that everybody's read. Okay? So if the few of you that are listening to me, you're already into the rare aspects, and you're getting stuff that people are not getting. So you have an opportunity to use it. So here's team. Here's the 9-year median targets. Blue is high. Red is low. You can look at KC is low, but that should make you like, well, Minnesota's low. Hold it. Justin Jefferson's here. It should urge you to go back and take a look. Make sure you understand, the 9-year. And again, 9-year might be too much, but I would rather it be too far back than not far enough. I want to catch all the trends and then move it up and look at the latest trends, right? I need something to compare reference class forecasting. So I do that with the next metric. I call it 21 versus all. That means 21 versus the 9 years, percentage-wise, up or down versus the 9-year median. So Atlanta's 34% low. Denver, Detroit, New Orleans, Philly's low. Who's high? Tennessee's high. Minnesota's high, so that tells me recency. Minnesota is all good. Kansas City's high, even though the overall is low, but in recent years, 2021. Chargers, Rams, Dallas, Carolina, Buffalo. Just realize 2021 was a weird year, so just take some of this with a grain. And you're saying, well, how weird was it? Well, this chart over here, wide receivers, the tops, 20%, the bottoms, I count per year. And you look, there was a lot of bottoms. 2015 was 9 and 6. Wow, that's to the plus side. 16 to the plus side. 17 down. 18 was a lot, but it was really divergent, right? There was extreme highs and lows. Look at that. 2019 lows. 2020 was kind of equal. Look at 2021. 8 and 3 was like 2016. 8 and 2. Something very extreme here in 2021 was a lot like 2016. So if you won a lot of money in 2016 in PPR, maybe you're good. If you lost, look at your diary, then, you better rethink what you did here and maybe change your plans, okay? That's why we keep a diary to look at across this, right? See what's what. So how does this look overall. Here's the blue or the median, 9-year median, and the 21 versus all. Again, 21 was skewed, but you can find the extremes here. Look at Atlanta extreme, Denver's extreme, Philly's extreme. So those are the three extreme teams here. Look at the highest in 9 years, though. Atlanta's one of the highest. With Julio and Matt Ryan at his peak. Denver was good. Pittsburgh with Ben sucked. Well, he put together a real great 9-year run, didn't he? Tampa Bay, Brady last few years, he's really moved them up. The Giants haven't been too bad, right? Miami's coming up. Jacksonville, Houston, okay? Arizona. So take a look. If you look at 340, you can see who's above. Then you look at 280 and who's below here and close to that. So you can get the relative strengths and weaknesses of teams using this data here. Very intriguing. Here is the comparison running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers. And I added 2 categories: percentage of the top versus the total extremes. And I circled in red the worst years. So look at 2020 for running back targets was really bad. Look at 2021, one of the best. That's interesting. And here's the totals. Just I added highs, the extremes. Look at 2021 was the least extreme year in 9 years. Least extreme. That means most players, most teams went closer to the median than any other year that's been. Again, very strange with RBs. Tight ends, 2021. Here's another high. 2020. I'm telling you, 2021 strange. 4 teams, a little bit skewed to the top there. Look at that, 9 versus 5. There it is. Look at 2020 with COVID. Sucked for RB, sucked for tight ends. Wide receivers, 2016. Remember, we just talked about it. Here's 2021. Clearly extreme years. Here's 11, one of the lowest, 16, 17 were 10, but still look, 3 highs. So when somebody says, how do we know 2021? Well, that's right there. The extreme highs last year, you should not ignore that, because that probably means we're not going to see that. Some teams that we are counting on are going to disappoint us. Some positions and players. I'm worried this is giving us an idea about, oh, by the way, this should be tight end, that should be wide receiver. So don't be tricked by that. So I am concerned 2022 is we're going to be like, wow, they're going to say, you're going to hear it, this is a strange year. No, it's not a strange year. Okay? You look across over a wide landscape, it's not a strange year. Okay, yeah, if you lived in the jungle all your life and somebody knocked you out and took you to the desert and dropped you in there, wow, this is strange. Yeah? You're not effing awake here, folks. 2021, very strange. I urge you to give a lot more thinking about the ADPs this year. I am worried, especially the deeper ones. I am concerned. There's a lot more tricks and treats out there this year just because 2021 was such an extreme. And remember, the ADPs at a lot of places are just following what happened last year. And if they're following these extreme, weird, 1 year out of 9 strange situation, in PPR especially, not, standard, but PPR, you're going to get tricked. Again, I don't think anybody's telling you that except me, okay? And, of course, pundits after the fact, come January, I told y'all to remember that one obscure tweet I did back in June. Remember, man, ain't nobody got time for that. Come on. Anyway, 2021 extreme year, and we're gonna get to see that some more too. So what I did then, and I've done this for the other positions, is I looked year to year differences. Just wanted to crawl across the years. So when it says diff, compare 2014 to 13, 15 to 14, 16 to 15, etc. So you can look at the extreme 2 years there and see who was high and low, who really went. Look at Pittsburgh. You think Ben, uh, he was on target in the COVID year, but boy, he exploded here. Look at, uh, you know, New Orleans with Breeze here, really sad. Okay. Look at Aaron Rodgers, really stepped it up last year. Matt Ryan, you think he's out of gas? Look at that. Think Lamar Jackson really stepped it up last year? Yes, he did. Everybody talking about Allen. Look what he did last year. Only 17 plus versus the year before 80 plus. So did good plus, but not as good as 2020. So just he's going awful early. Okay, awful early. Okay, so what I did then with the differences is I looked across at each difference, each year's target difference year to year. And so I did a box and whisker graph, and the box contains about 66% of the teams are in that box, that difference. So most teams between plus 50 target difference and minus 50. So in 2013. Look at 2021. Look at the box, 50, 25. And look at the whisker. It is the lowest whisker in 9 years. When I say extreme, I'm telling you, that is more evidence that 2021 was based more tight per team differences right there and not a lot of downside. And people are going to get tricked because look at 2018 differences. Look at that. You talk about a hell of a whisker. 17, look at that. Look at 16, look at that. 15, 14, 13. Look at all that. But anyway, 2021, something very unusual happened. We've had lots of different lines of evidence supporting that conclusion. Okay, and again, people are not aware of that, and you guys are great. Again, I think at this point, since we've never seen this, it's kind of hard to guess. So keep your diaries handy so we can consider. If 2022 ends up like 2021, let's just say it's just like it's a weak downside, then we can see, hey, did you win last year? Okay, well, continue. Did you get blown up? Okay, change your game. That's why diaries can be very intriguing if you can look at these landscape metrics here and see what years favored your style of play. Again, well, nobody's talking about that. I can't help it. I'm talking about it. Okay. Let's see next. Yeah. So here is then, I took the median differences, year-to-year differences, and in 9 years, you can see blue is positive and red is extremely negative. So that means a lot more down years than up years for a lot of these teams. Look at KC. The Raiders have done well. Minnesota's done well. Tampa Bay has done well. Pittsburgh has done well. Buffalo, Arizona, look at the downside. Atlanta, Cleveland's always sucky. Everyone in Cleveland's sucky. Well, there you go. New England's been really sucky since Brady left. I don't care what they say. So here's the 9-year data. So if we then take a look at that population, the median of the differences, getting deep in the metrics, we see that most of the teams live between minus 8.5 targets and 15. So I would argue that any wide receivers that went up or down in that box between minus 8.5 and 15 is not worth your time to worry about. What you're looking for so-called breakouts and things would be those that are really, really expanded here, or the ones that were a bust should be in there. Okay, so now we know 41 and 32 is kind of an overall the whisker. So that defines the boundary, the ceiling and the floor here when we look across. I've got to do a look at all the wide receivers and in this metric here. I need to, give you the list here. I mean, you can do that, but if you want to, I'll try to get around to doing it. Don't have time for every damn thing, but here it is. So to me, this is another one of these key payoffs in this lesson here. Man, this is just gold. Here we go. Nuggets are being tossed out at you here. Okay. And if we look at a scattergram and look between and this should be a little lower, my bad, and here's minus 8. So that should be about right there. But overall, you can see the team's extremes, highs and extreme lows, and most of the league is in the box. This is basically the box. And here are the whiskers. Okay, so take a look at some of these downward teams and look at their wide receivers. Just how deep do you want to draft on Cleveland, for instance? Versus, say Buffalo or somewhere. Say New England. So don't get tricked this year. Okay, 42 minutes of fun stuff you will never hear anywhere else unless it makes some websites some money. Okay, there's no money here, folks. Anyway, we're having fun. Thank you few for listening to me run my mouth. I ain't got time to tweet all this crap. I'll let y'all do that. I don't tweet a lot. Okay, just enough just to say, hey, come find out. But I don't have time to tweet all day and all night. Okay, guys. I think I hadn't decided my next strategy. Remember, this is research in action. I have no clue what I'm doing next. I got to kind of pull back and think about it. This is a kind of a sub-block in this I know I'm going towards the players at some point. I do know that, but I think distribution needs to be looked at as well. Is that how do we know that vacated targets doesn't change distribution versus keeping the targets in the one position? In other words, if in Kansas City, Tyreek Hill leaving, does that mean the wide receivers just chop up what's left? Is that the vacated? Or do those targets change the distribution to Kelsey and Solaire or whoever? What's going on? Or is it a combination? Or, what happens? Or vacated targets really don't exist? Okay, I can think about 3 questions there to consider. So I do definitely want to look at that as well. So I'm guessing 6, 8 more lessons here in this journey. So I will continue in July here. While everybody else is clicking and ticking there, I'm going to be digging deep in the data cave. Okay, thanks. Dr. Bush signing off. Woo woo. Lots of fun.